So what are you working
All right.
on?
I am flatting a Boulder and Fleet story that I drew, I want to say 2 years ago.
Okay.
And it's a mini comic I did for Inktober 1 year called A Friendly Game, but I'm in the process of redrawing the entire thing.
I know
Um,
that story.
you do know that story. You probably have a copy of the mini comic.
I'm sure I do somewhere. Somewhere somewhere behind me. It's
Yes.
probably existing. And you're doing this to what endeavor?
Um, I I guess my thinking is I would like to have I'm doing this the same format as that book I did called Mining for Trouble. So
Yes.
it's a square format, and my goal is that when Dr. Bear comes out, when I'm going to shows, festival signings, and everything, I'll also have two other books featuring characters from this big book that I can also hawk. Right,
Got it. Got it.
sort of like what you're working on, which is you're trying to do a series.
Yes.
You are
Well, I
doing a
would say
series. You're not trying.
I
You're
was gonna
doing it.
yeah, I was gonna say I'm not trying. I am working on a series. This is so what I'm working on right now is page 10 or the artwork for page 10 of what would be book 6 of this series.
And the URL's on the screen, but
Yeah,
you can
it's
talk
a
about it.
superhero universe. Superhero universe. Animal superheroes for
Boy, that seems
the light of all.
it seems very very congruent with what I'm working on.
It's almost like we are simpatico.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. So right here, this situation, I can use my cursor to show you like what's happening. Wait, where is it? This here, I was trying to decide which head to use for this figure, and I'm settling on the one that's on the right.
Mm. Oh, those are both heads that were going to go on that figure. You just drew one, then moved it aside, then picked another one to
Yeah,
go there.
yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. Trying to find the right angle and the right facial expression. But this one is sorted, so I'm going to delete it. And then I got to draw these heads. So
Hey,
procedurally,
Matt Nelson's here saying, "Oh, it's a big crossover event." It is a crossover event.
it is a big crossover event. So procedurally, what I do is I have my page laid out, and I know that this blue block is where all my art goes. And here's my text of my art direction of what goes in there. So then I rough it out like this. And then I put the lettering in, which is, I think I have another balloon in there somewhere. Yeah, here. And then I start penciling over that. So it goes from rough pencils to cleaned up pencils, but I got to draw some zebra heads now.
So I guess like for people who don't know, we should probably say like what you're showing is this is not exactly. I mean, it is a comic, but it's not exactly a comic that you're working on.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Format wise, it's a comedy. It's an illustrated chapter book with comic sections in it. So right now I'm in a non-comics section, but there is this montage image of a zebra kicking butt on some SEAL troopers.
And this is you're working on the sixth book in the series, so there's 5 books people can get right now at superherouniverse.com.
Yes, all true. Yeah, so this is book 6 about a time traveling zebra who goes back to the past to stop an apocalyptic future from happening. And this is early in the book, so we are in the apocalyptic future. This is the time traveling zebra, but she has not yet traveled through time.
I love how your sound effects are actually like designed and integrated into the art.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
And imply the movement.
I know I know we've talked about it before. You're very passionate about sound effects, as you call them, sound design.
Yeah.
It is not my favorite thing in the world, but anytime I try and just like find a font that works, it never works. So I have to just write out my sound effect and then hope I can letter it nice and clean when the time
And,
comes.
and if I may use a Gregg Schiegelism, like a gentleman.
That's right. I try and do it like a gentleman. Exactly.
I had an experience in my classroom. This poor 17-year-old kid got to experience me at my worst. I'll see if I can draw it on the screen. He had a panel where, let's see if I can draw the panel first. Let's draw the panel. And he had like a dragon dinosaur thing going like this, and a little character down here talking. And he wanted to do a roar, but he didn't know how to do the roar. And so he's like, so, well, do I have to draw it backwards like this? Like it's coming out of his mouth kind of thing? And I got really excited about, like, look at all this negative space you have
Yeah.
that you can work with. And you could integrate this, buddy. You could do something like this where you have a big O R, O, A, and then have the R's going up into the mouth if you really want it emanating from the mouth. You could also have it happening behind the character's word balloon, because we'll know that's an R and there's another R there. You know, and I went on like 4 or 5 different iterations of this, and that poor kid, I watched his eyes glaze over like, yeah, I just wanted to know. Do I put it forward or backward?
Yeah. I would have done what you just showed, the text behind everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there are times where it's like, all right, I don't know if this is going to have a sound effect. I don't know if it needs one.
Yeah.
Because certain fight scenes, like there's a page coming up where it's going to be, I don't know if I'll get to it during this session, but there's like a lot of chaos happening. It's like, well, you can't just have 1,000 blast sound effects. Like that just would clutter everything up. So for me, it's like, all right, once I've done a single blast sound effect, I guess you kind of hope, in the same way that you can establish a background and then presume that the reader will know where the characters are in the preceding panels, not preceding, ensuing panels. I guess
Ensuing.
you hope that once you've established a sound effect, if that effect is still happening, you don't have to maintain that sound effect forever. In theory,
In theory.
yeah.
Our
But
regular stream attendee, Matt, agrees with your assessment of what to do with that roar. So there's 2 votes for the roar behind the word balloon.
excellent.
I don't know. It depends. It depends. I mean, I'm thinking about Mining for Trouble, that book that I did, and like Sapphire, the little green girl with like the crystal cannons on her arms, like those things were always talking. They were always going, you know.
Right.
So
I mean, I guess you make the decision depending on what your page looks like, right? Like if your page
yeah,
would look too cluttered with too many sound effects, you cut them out. In the same way
I
that if your
suppose so.
page is
Yeah.
going to look too busy with too much background, you minimize it. You show one element so that things are grounded, but you're not overdoing it, over cluttering your
Greg,
page. Because
Greg,
yeah,
there's never too much background. You always need more
oh,
background.
I disagree. Clarity is always the goal. Too
No,
much background can.
showing off my skills as an illustrator is always the goal.
Yeah. Well, as we've talked about many times in the past, like I've done school visits or talked to kids who, like, can I see your comic? And the, well, I not yet. I want to get better at drawing. And then I try to point out that things like Diary of a Wimpy Kid
Yep.
are stick figures, and that sometimes being good at drawing doesn't actually help. It can get in the way of getting the job done. XKCD, is that still a thing? I used to use that as an example. Now I don't even know if anybody knows what that is.
My students don't, but I mean, I think adults do.
Yeah, but I guess I need new references for things that
Yeah.
are simply drawn. I guess Dogman.
Dogman's a good one.
Yeah. But it was fun when it was both Wimpy Kid and XKCD were both around at the same time. And you could just say, like, look, these two very successful things are stick figures. Don't worry about how you draw. Is it good? Is it a funny story? Is it clear?
Let me read
Etc.
this
etc.
comment from Matt. I also think there's something to be said for the silent action scene. I sometimes think of a big active panel the same way I do a slow motion scene in an action movie where the sound gets muted or dulled and the music comes up. So sometimes I like to do an action sequence with no sound effects. Or he said
Sure,
no SFX.
that
Yeah.
is also effective. I guess yeah. It's a lot of it. I'm thinking of now. I'm trying to remember. It's been so long since I've read like Year One, but or any like Matt Wagner stuff where he would draw like
Oh,
Grendel, or
yeah.
there'd be like
Yeah.
12 panels of just fighting, and
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they were always silent. But also, if there's like a path or a biff or something, it's always a nice touch when there's like a little bit extra something.
Yeah.
So what's my next panel? All right, the next thing, I'm going to clear this out because this has to be its own. So I do these books, and they come out as both print books and ebooks. So when I do that, I have to think about how they're going to be produced in both directions. So the print book, the page would look like what you're seeing right here. Like there'd be a full, it would be text and then artwork. But
Let me
then
let
for the
me
ebook,
zoom in on that.
oh, okay.
Let's see. Here we go. There we go. You can see a little bit better now. Hmm. Oh,
Of art, and then it'll be this panel. So now I'm going to work on this panel. Did that make sense? I think it did.
say that again because I accidentally like muted you when you were talking about this, Greg.
Okay. In the printed book, it's going to look like this. It's going to be this montage
Yeah.
up top that is cut off by this panel below it. But
Right.
in the ebook version, I'm going to separate these two pieces of art. So actually, the top image is going to be complete without the panel. It's just going to be all this artwork.
Oh, wow.
And then the ebook will then have this panel as its own. I'm getting lost in my own stuff. This panel below will be its own thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I have to draw behind that panel, and then when I ink it, it'll all clear up and make sense. But in case anybody's wondering, what is he doing? Why did he get rid of all the artwork up top? That's why. It's all technical mumbo jumbo. It's all
Mm.
thinking ahead of not a problem, but just thinking ahead. Okay, here's what I have to accomplish, and here's the best way to do it. In the same way that I do all my lettering before I start penciling, so that I know where all the words go and I know to make room for them.
Oh, mercy. Yeah, that. Okay, so on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being like, oh, this is exhausting,
Yeah.
1 being like, no big deal. How would you rate that, like holding both of those concerns at the same time?
Which concerns the
Like,
print book and the
yeah, like understanding that this is going to look two different ways when you're drawing it.
It took a minute to early on. It took a second to sort of adjust because you don't want to have to do things twice, right? Like you just want to
Mm-hmm.
get the thing done and have it be the same experience no matter what the reading device is. But it also was
Mm-hmm.
very clear to me that it's a different experience. Like you look at a whole page versus on a Kindle, you can change the font size. So there's a different dynamic happening. So I just basically it was a case of me accounting for that. And then once I figured that out and figured out how to compose a page so that it had just enough um, modularity, that's a good word, then it all became very simple. And it was just a case of thinking ahead. So knowing, okay, this panel, when it goes to ebook, I should draw the whole thing out. I mean, I don't have
Mm.
to. Honestly, I could just have this chunk of art, this montage and this panel exist as one image in the ebook, and it wouldn't affect anybody, and nobody would know the difference. I'm giving myself a little bit extra work that I don't need to do, and maybe this conversation will convince me not to. Um, but there's also a part of me that says like, why not make if it's an easy adjustment, why not make the adjustment for the sake of a better reading experience? And it is a pretty easy adjustment.
So yeah, so you have to basically, because of the Kindle, and I'm just doing this to like reinforce a question that Matt
Yeah,
had
yeah,
in
yeah.
the chat, is
I
like
understand.
you have to sort of build the art so that that reflow can happen if people mess with font sizes in the Kindle edition.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I do a comics page, let me see. Could I bring up a comics page? Hold on. Let me see if this was page 8 a comics page. Yeah. So here's a page that I worked on yesterday. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 panels. Uh, in the Kindle flow, this will not present as a full page. You'll see panel 1, and then panels 2 and 3, and then panel 4. So if you
Mm-hmm.
change the font size, you may only see panel 1 until you turn the page, and then you'll see panels 2, 3, and 4, or it'll break up however the flow breaks up in the Kindle
Yeah.
reading experience.
Okay.
So it's
Yes. Like responsive design in websites. Basically the same idea.
yes, yeah. So I'm designing my pages in tiers, knowing that
Yeah.
each tier is going to be its own art element in the Kindle. But in the book itself, you see the page as a complete page, which again, as comic makers, that's how we're thinking of things, and you want it to sort of read that way, and you want there to be a panel to panel progression, which is why I don't treat, if there's 2 panels in a tier, I don't break those apart in the Kindle, because there's usually a sequence of events that I want to be read as a sequence. And the second you break those up, you get into, so this is going to be a bit of a throwback, but there was a time where in the rush to make digital comics, there was a comic book, an online publisher called Thrillbent, led by Mark Wade. Do you remember
I
this, Jersey?
remember this. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a case of like trying to, as I said at the time, and I said it to Mark Wade himself, it seemed like a solution in search of a problem, which is they were creating comics that had like single panels with then I don't even know how if I can explain it anymore, but it's sort of like very not even limited animation. Just it was. How do you explain it, Jersey?
There were panels that, like, if you did the popular thing people do now, where like you'll copy and paste art from panel to panel, and you only make a minor change, you would just like move, you do a gesture, or you'd click or something, and that panel would just vanish, and there'd be another panel underneath it, like the other panel would just be there.
I guess it was
Um,
it was sort of like guided view in Comixology,
yeah,
but you were only seeing one panel at a time, so it wasn't really. Again, what I think the magic of comics, if we can use that kind of language, is that sequential image. Those two images side by side, and the illusion of an action in a static medium.
yeah.
Right? If we could do that
I
that conversation.
Yeah, I remember I had Mark Wade on the Comics Are Great podcast to talk about that. This is like 10 years ago now. And I remember, was the comic called Luther? I forget, but like he did like this thing where there was like a trick where he did a jump scare with that technique. I'm like, okay, that is an interesting case to be made for this method of reading, but it still doesn't feel as comic-y as comics does, right? Because yeah,
Right.
you're looking at one panel at a time. So
Yeah.
I had a lot of difficulty with it.
I mean, a jump scare is interesting because that is a hard thing to do in comics. Is like, how do you scare somebody?
Yep.
Um, and some of it is a page turn, I guess, but then some of it is
Yeah.
also like, well, maybe, and this is going to be controversial.
All right, here we
And
go.
and okay,
Hot take
maybe,
time.
yeah, maybe comics aren't the best tool for everything.
Oh my god.
Is that is
Uh,
that too heavy?
2012 Jersey is tearing the walls down right now, Kool-Aid Man style. But
Uh,
2023 Jersey is like, yeah, that's fine.
I probably am the same. I had my time where I'm like, you can do anything in comics. And you go,
Yeah.
yeah, but comics don't have a soundtrack. Comics, there's certain things that just there are things comics can do that other mediums can't, and there are things other mediums can do that comics can't, and we just have to kind of allow for those things to exist.
Yeah, Matt is claiming he's going to go put up a shelf with comics, and I'm going to do open heart surgery with comics.
Yeah, exactly. Now you could probably teach. You could probably do like a demo of open heart surgery with comics. You could draw it and show it. You know, you could do a recipe
Sure.
book. There are definitely things where comics benefit. Obviously, every instruction manual is technically a comic. If you want to, if you want to extrapolate that way.
No, I remember being on a panel at Dan Michigan ages ago. This is like all going all the way back to 2007, where we were talking about a book I was reading where a character shows up in book 1 and then apparently dies or vanishes, and they show up in book 3 and we don't know that it's that character until another character says, "Oh, his name used to be this," and you're like, "Oh my god, it's that guy from book 1." You can't do that in a visual medium because we would see the actor, right? If Patrick Stewart played that character in the first story, when he shows up in the third one, we would know, right? But so like, it was a moment when I was like, yeah, comics can't do that as easily as prose. There's some things prose should do better.
That's true. That's true. Although there was an idea that my friend Smitty and I had, and I don't know how much of this I can, but it was basically like a riff on Ladybugs. You know that movie Ladybugs, the Rodney Dangerfield movie?
I haven't seen it since I was a kid, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's like a little boy who joins the girls' soccer team. So there was an idea that was similar to that, and we were thinking about doing it as a comic. And I remember sitting there drawing and going like, okay, how do I make this boy character? Like, how do I design a character that looks like it could be both and switch off? And I was like, wait, it's a comic book. I could just draw both of them, and it doesn't really matter because I could just say they're the same person.
True. We have a little bit. We can go off model in ways that you can't in other media.
Right. So if this character that disappeared in this novel reappears, if they look the same, yeah, then you're in trouble. But if they've changed their appearance, if it's a Count of Monte Cristo situation, and I did say Crisco.
I know you did. Thank you.
Yeah. If it's that, then
avuncular moment with Gregg Schigiel.
I can't take all the credit for that particular mispronunciation. I've heard that mispronunciation before, so that one's not mine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a Tom Sharpling mispronunciation that I'm borrowing. Probably shouldn't have done it. Otherwise, I would have just avoided all that explanation. Or I could have said Count of Monte Cristo, and that would have been fine too. Anyway. So that's a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting. All right, I'm changing the subject briefly.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so I'm drawing this character, right? And this character is this zebra. So I'm drawing from the back. So this is basically where her butt would be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And her costume from the front looks like this. This is the belt, and it's like a loincloth situation.
Right.
Right? So from the back, it would also be a loincloth. But if the loincloth goes like this, then you're seeing butt cheek, right?
Yeah.
And that's not cool. So I got to figure out a design element on the back here where it works.
Wait a minute. You didn't do turnarounds of your characters, Gregg Schigiel?
No, I did not. I sure didn't. I mean, I guess she doesn't have to be loincloth in the back, although I've already drawn enough images of her loincloth in the back. I think. Did I? Hold on.
Well, does she need a loincloth in the back? Why can't it just be like underpants?
It can. The question is, see now, here's where I get myself into a bit of trouble. Hold on, I'll be right back. Wait, no, I won't. I'm going to look on my computer. The problem is, she appears in the previous book, and if I drew her loincloth in the previous book, then I have to keep that up.
Yeah. Oh, Greg.
So let's see. What did I draw in the previous book? Let me find it.
So Matt, you don't do turnarounds either? Yeah, I rarely do turnarounds for my characters. I'll draw like a front view and figure like that's good enough. I know what they look like from behind.
I mean, some characters I'll do a more elaborate sort of design sequencing bit of business, but not typically. Okay, let's see. Here's my 3-page sequence from the previous book. I'll open them in clips so people can see it. Yeah, I drew a back loincloth. You can see it right there. You can see it right there.
I want to say, that Matt and I, we were talking about this last week, I think, about this idea of like having to, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, but this idea of like having to refer to past material to say, how did I draw that character again? What do they look like? What are their shoes?
But that said, I mean, I could do, there we go, back loincloth. It goes from briefs to back loincloth, and it doesn't matter. I mean, I could also have the loincloth go like this and just show that there's briefs under it, but
no.
I'm gonna stick to this.
Okay.
And I could also just do this whole thing in silhouette, but I'm not doing that because I want you to be able to see. I mean, she's in the foreground. Why shouldn't you see her? Naturally. Although I always forget how I designed her zebra stripes, so I have to check my reference on that.
Oh, that's right, Matt. I think, this might have been something we were talking about with regard to my character Maggie, and I forgot which side her one tooth is on. And you mentioned that you have a character with a peg leg. So Matt Nelson is the author of a comic called Catbeard the Pirate, Greg, in case you just so you know who you're talking with.
Nice to meet you, Matt. Unless we've met before, in which case, nice to stream with you again. Yeah, I forget with this character, because I've only drawn her a couple of times, is like what direction her zebra stripes go. So I have to check my original drawings that I did in the coloring book way back when.
That's right. There's a coloring book people can get too. There's 5 books and a coloring book.
The coloring book, aka my little like encyclopedia reference volume. That in the course of making these books is some stuff is not entirely accurate. I should go back into the coloring book and make some corrections.
Now, we should just very briefly touch on the coloring book because one of the things that I love about it in talking with you about as you were generating the characters. So the coloring book it's like all of the different superheroes and supervillains from the superhero universe. And listening to you generate all of those characters and coming up with the names for all of these different superpowered animal creatures, because there's a lot. It's not just a couple, right? It's like how many?
I think it's 20 heroes and 23 villains. I think it's what the final count is for the coloring book.
So, yeah, like hearing you work out those character names and hearing the 11-year-old Greg like giggle with joy as he came up with them.
Oh yeah, it's fun.
All right, so name a couple favorites.
I think the one that was for me early on I came up with Watermane, who was my aquatic character. That it was either when I came up with the name, it's like, all right, well, this has to be either a horse or a lion, and then I settled on a lion. So Watermane is like an Aquaman, but he's a lion. And I just again, it's the double meaning. I guess it's not an entendre. It's just like a pun. Yeah, right. Like the simple pun of it. And then at a certain point, I wanted to come up with something that would be like in I don't know what the term would be. I'm blanking on the wrestling terminology, but like just like a supervillain group of palookas, like a wrecking crew, right? Yeah. Like a thematic group of villains. I was trying to come up with one of those. The Royal Flush Gang, whatever. Yeah. And I came up with this thing, and it was one of these ideas that when it hit me, I was like, this is so good, and I got so excited about it. And there's like 4 pages in my sketchbook of me designing these characters, but it was a group of farm animals with weather powers called the Barnstormers. And everything about it was just so like on the money that it was just it's thrilling because you feel like you've really like discovered electricity or something. And then not every character has like a punny name. So the character I'm drawing right now is basically a character with invisibility powers, and he's just called Blender because he blends into the surroundings. So sometimes it's just a standard superhero name or supervillain name, and other times it is this sort of like punny kind of wordplay, which I sometimes think about wouldn't only is only valuable in English speaking countries. Like if this were ever
Right.
translated into other languages, like all that stuff is lost.
Right.
Unless there is a word for barnstormer in French, which there might be. Seems like a very American thing, but I don't know. I would leave that to a French person to. But I can't
Right.
imagine like water main means the same thing in Poland,
Right.
where like the word for that pipe would mean the same thing as the hair on a lion's head.
Probably not. No.
So
Yeah.
maybe in a foreign edition it'd just be called water lion.
It's just wet cat in Polish.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wet cat, exactly. Now, in
Which
terms of creating characters and designing them, so this character that I'm drawing is Blender, and you know a little bit about this, Jersey, because we talk when we're not streaming.
That's right.
Um,
That's right.
and when I was working on this character, I first didn't know what it was going to be, and I've since made it a caracal. I think that's how it's pronounced. Um, but originally, it was going to be a character with a cloak that anything under the cloak becomes invisible. But
Oh yeah.
for every animal type, I was trying to figure out like the cloak just technically wasn't working. It wasn't like the logic of it wasn't there, like the physical logic of it. So I've switched it up where Blender has to be touching whoever he wants to invisibilize.
Okay.
Uh, just because the cloak, I tried so many different designs and different animal types, but I'm just like, all right, every animal, if it has horns, if it has ears, it has something, it's going to get in the way of the cloak itself. And then if you put a hood on an animal with a long snout, like, okay, how do you cover the hood with this? It's like I got in my head too far, and I gave up. I gave it up because at one point it was going to be a wildebeest. Not a, yeah, it was going to be a wildebeest, and then it was going to be a warthog. There were a lot of animals that were vying for contention to be uh, to be Blender, and I settled on Caracal.
What's caracal?
Caracal is a wild cat. It's in the big cat family, but it's not huge. It's probably like the size of a bobcat or a lynx, and they have these long ears with like tufts on the end of them.
Okay.
Um, that's it's just so I was doing the other animals in this team, loosely based on the Fantastic Four, are uh, the zebra, and then on the next page, which we're going to get to shortly, there's a lion and an ostrich, which are all like African plains, like animals you'd see on safari. So I did my minimal research into other animals you might see on a safari. So it's wildebeest, um, warthog, a couple of other. There were some other big cats, but I already had a lion, and some other birds, but I already had an ostrich. So it was finding an animal that made sense, and then I remembered that in the Fantastic Four there are siblings. I was like, okay, I could have two cats, even though they're not the
Ah.
same kind of cat. Even though I could have also had two birds. I didn't want to. I didn't want two birds for whatever reason.
Hmm.
Yeah, makes there's no rhyme or reason to most of this stuff,
It,
except
well,
that for other stuff,
it's a gut
there's
reaction.
there's also for other stuff it's entirely rhyme and reason. Like it's all considered and thought of. So go figure.
Uh,
But
no,
no, I
for
don't
me,
do
it's
turnarounds.
my my decisions are mostly gut reaction on that.
How much stuff do you do? Uh, so speaking of character designs and turnarounds, how much work do you do before you start drawing in terms of designing a character, and how much of it happens on the page?
Uh, clarify.
All right, so you introduce characters in a book, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, and obviously those characters need to be drawn. So what percentage of the characters are designed ahead of time before you start on the page, and how many of them are, there's characters, their names, but you're going to design them as you're working on that page. You're not going
Oh,
to do like design work ahead of time.
I when it came to Dr. Bear, they were all designed ahead of time. I mean, they were all designed in the pitch, right? So,
But
and
not background characters.
well, the only other background characters are characters who already existed in other books that I did, right? So, like,
Okay.
Captain Lau and Maggie from Captain Cat make a cameo. Boulder and Fleet make a cameo, and I think those are literally the only 4 other characters in the whole book.
All right. So without giving anything away about the book, because I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But like, even the relics, like you designed all those relics, none of them were designed like in the moment on the page.
Okay, yes. When we go into Baron von Bear or Dr. Bear, see, there we go.
Yeah,
we go into Dr. Bear's keep, when his stronghold of where all the cursed objects are. Yeah, I was making all that stuff as I went along. It was made up on that page. Like, oh, I could do a boat. It could be a cursed like model boat. I don't know what it does, but if I need to do a story later, I can do it.
Right.
But yes, certainly.
Okay.
And to a smaller degree, the worlds were done that way too. Like they go to like 3 different scary places, and I knew in one of them, I'm like, I want it to be like ancient Mayan ruins, but they had like futuristic technology. So that's all I had, right? And then when it came time to draw the pages, like in the thumbnails, I had like some like Mayan temple-ish kind of sketches, but like to draw the scenes, I just went to the library like a gentleman, checked out a whole bunch of books on Mayan architecture and language and culture and everything, and like just drank it all in before I drew those pages.
Speaking of libraries,
uh-huh.
I'm about to pivot us to a new topic. How many years ago was it? 7 years ago? 8 years ago? You and I were at a library. We were in the Toronto Public Library.
Okay.
For TCAF.
Yes.
Which is this weekend. I see a lot of tweets from TCAF.
Okay.
And I have a feeling about it, and I wonder if your feeling matches mine, which is I'm okay not being there.
Oh man. I
have no feeling of FOMO, to use that terminology.
Yes. The thought of standing behind a table for 2 days and doing the pitch for my book, not fun. It doesn't sound like I love being around creative people. I love, catching up with oh my gosh, there's Katie Shanahan, oh my gosh, there's so-and-so, that kind of thing is super fun. But, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of time. Yeah. And nothing against TCAF, nothing against any comic festival for that matter. Cause look, I have been the director of a comics festival for 2 years. I have been the programming coordinator for a comics festival for 12 years. I know how hard it is. I'm never going to bash a comics festival as long as I live. But it's expensive to do.
And this isn't even a bash. This is just like a thing of like I just noticed in the past I would see things going on. I'm like, oh, that would be fun to be at. Oh, look who's there. And I just don't have those feelings now. I'm just like, all right, I'm not there. Whatever.
Yes.
C'est la vie.
C'est la vie. Okay, so let me go through a couple of chat messages first before we move on, because I do want to get into the weeds on this. I love it. This is like
sure.
I've been thinking about this a lot, Greg. So Matt was responding to your time traveling characters and said, so is the story about a time traveling zebra? Is it called Here Today Gone Safari? Ayo. And then sunglasses emoji. Although I will say, Matt, you won't be disappointed if you check out the books and see Gregg's chapter titles, because they are along those lines.
Yeah, I do give a lot of thought to my chapter titles. This particular book is going to be called, I think, unless the title changes in the next several weeks, it's Future Fighter.
Future Fighter. Well, like the book titles, you usually pick like something like really succinct and clear.
Yeah. So the book title is Future Fighter, which also it does have a double meaning. She's a fighter from the future, and she is fighting to stop the future. So she's fighting the future, and she's from the future.
And she's kind of fighting against an imagined future too, which is cool.
Yes, yeah. She's
all of that is there. It's good.
Fighting the future, yes. Fighting the future from the future. Let me see. I could probably bring up some of the chapter titles for the next book, but
well, there's a Desperately Seeking Susan one in there that I really like.
There is, yes. There is Desperately Seeking Super Big Girl is one of the chapters. Yeah. If I had the other books within reach, I could just like look at the physical books and rattle off some of the chapter titles. But the chapter titles I give way too much. I shouldn't say too much. I give a lot of thought to the chapter titles. And it's always fun when you give something thought and somebody else catches it. It's always very satisfying.
Yeah. Okay. So, but talk about FOMO. Yes. Yeah. Man, Gregg, the energy required to be I do want to couch this. I don't want to, as you would say, yuck anybody's yum. Yeah. People are excited to go to these things, and that's cool. They're excited. Yeah. But I think of getting a hotel, staying in a hotel, where, to quote Merlin Mann, every surface somebody's put their butt on that, and that and I pay a lot of money for that. And then I pay a lot of money to ship my books, and I got to deal with all of the stress of crossing the border, because last time I went to TCAF, I got stuck at the border and like put in an office. They didn't tell me what was happening, and they like dug our whole car out, and they were like, "All right, you can go home." I'm like, "Well, what was that about?" Like, just standard thing. I'm like, "What? That was a standard thing? That was scary. I was in a cold room and you took my phone, you know?"
Yeah, TCAF has those extra elements of like it's international. Yeah. Although I bet you it's fun if you're like a paid guest and they just take care of everything for you.
I bet that's wonderful. Again, I've been the director of a festival. I have been the person who facilitates that for other people. They look like they're having a good time.
Yeah.
So yeah, probably, but like, yes, the managing all the cost and then managing all of the, because like then there's like a whole new pressure of like, well, I want to get the return on my investment, whether that's book sales or networking or having a good time with friends, right? And when I think of the festivals that I've been to where I had the best time, it was usually the one where only like a couple buddies went. Like I think of ALA Chicago, when it was like you and me and Ann and like Jacob and Chris just hanging out in a hotel room eating donuts. Oh, Tracy was there too. Yeah. So like that was like a lovely time, but like it was very low pressure. It wasn't like, oh, we got to get like 60 people at a dinner. Oh my God, 60 people at like some of the, when you go to like a diner with like 15 people and it's like, oh, this is going to be a nightmare, you know?
Yes, I do. So here's the finished penciled page. If you want to see, like, this is, I'm satisfied. I'm gonna move on to the next page.
All right, I want everybody to be able to see a sneak preview of Superhero Universe Book 6. Look at all that movement.
Yeah, there's a good action page.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes the 11-year-old in me sing. It's so good.
So then the next page is a big splash page, which is this one. So this one's there's some designing on the page happening here, because there's a time machine that I'm building and I don't know what it looks like. So we're gonna figure this one out together.
So yeah, I don't feel a whole lot of, I feel negative FOMO. I'm like, oh, you know what I get to do tonight? I get to go into my studio. I'm going to put on monster movies. Like actually, Destroy All Monsters. I think that's which kaiju movie is it? Matt, I know you'll be excited. I want to say it's Destroy All Monsters. Is on tonight on Svengoolie. And I'm gonna draw, and I'm just gonna like, eat some. I'm gonna get some ramen from like a ramen place down the street,
Sure.
and just draw and watch kaiju break stuff.
Sounds good. All right. So now, I have to hold on. What page am I on? Okay, here we go. Sometimes you get so many layers going that you lose track of what you're doing.
But I mean, Greg, you also you have known me for a long time. You knew me in my like, I'm coming in hot years. I'm coming to this festival, and I want to be friends with everybody.
Sure.
So that's another thing where I don't want to like come across as being like I figured out the answer. It's like, no, I was there when I would go to certain shows. I was like, all right, Team Comics, hooray for comics. We all love comics, right? Let's all high five and say the word comics.
Hell yeah, of course. and that's a great feeling, and especially when that feeling is like is returned. Like I know, there was one year I did Heroes Con in North Carolina, and I remember like on the flight back feeling like, ooh, I'm energized to make comics. I'm feeling like the charge, and that's a great feeling to walk away and feel like, okay, I'm gonna start. I gotta get to work. That doesn't always happen. A lot of times at the end of those shows, you're just like, I need a break, and there is no break because we've maybe talked about it, but I have my football metaphor for what a convention weekend is actually like, which is, and I'm not a huge football person, but I know enough about football to make this metaphor work. Football, it's you're in the game, and the game is your work that you're doing at home, and then you take a timeout to go to a convention. So you're stopping the work you're doing. So in football regards, you are no longer gaining any yardage, no yardage in your pursuit, but you're running wind sprints during the timeout. So you're doing good. All the work of a game. You're running the field like crazy, but you're gaining no yardage. Yep. You're making no progress in the game itself. And then you get back and you're like, all right, the game's back on. You go, wait, hold, no, and you're just tired.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, so man. That's another reason why, like, I see the convention happening. And I'm like, and some of it is my own, I don't have. I mean, I have stuff, but the stuff I'm doing, these superhero books, they're so their own little animal. Pun intended or not intended? Who knows? That I don't even know how they'd be received at something like TCAF. Who knows? But that's all stuff in my own head that doesn't entirely matter.
Well, I mean, okay, and so that's the other thing is like there's something about doing a school visit or a library visit that feels so much more low key because like you go, you do your thing, you sign your books, and then you just go like have a quiet evening with you and like maybe two other people. So it's a more comparatively speaking relaxed thing, and because you're the focus, because you're the visiting person, it feels like the return on investment is much higher comparatively speaking.
Oh, it's tremendous. I mean, the degree to which you're just like, there's an element of conventioning, of tabling that you don't have to do when you've specifically scheduled an event, which is you're not fighting for attention. like you're truly the one person that's talking, and there's like teachers around saying, hey, everybody, be quiet. This person's talking.
Yeah.
So not only are you not fighting for attention, you have people like getting your back to make sure you're being paid attention to, and there's a reason you're there, and there's no other, you're not having to convince any, if you're doing book sales, you've done them before you've shown up. So you're not selling anything. You're just presenting information to a group of people who hopefully will be receptive and ask interesting questions. But it's a different experience completely.
It is.
And once,
yeah. Well, I've been thinking about this a lot because I was having this conversation with some of my co-teachers at one of the residencies I'm leading right now, and I was talking about how, when I work with in as a teaching artist, I've noticed that the atmosphere is much more like comparatively speaking, it's less stressful and more collegial because we're really not in competition with one another. We're there to support each other in the explicit pursuit of raising up the lives of kids. Now, of course, there's stinkers in every job, right? There's people who don't necessarily buy into that mission, but for the most part, generally speaking, everybody there is there for that purpose, even if they're a grump. When you go to a comics festival or convention, as much as I hate it, and I've tried to like sort of say it doesn't have to be this way, there is an implicit competition that's at work there, right?
Yeah.
There's an implicit, I have to get my return on investment for my time here. I have to get my networking in. And I don't agree with the idea, but there is also an element of like, well, your win is my loss among some people. And that is much more prevalent at these trade show type events.
Well, sure. I mean, there's a scarcity. There's a scarcity of time. There's only 2 days. There's a scarcity of
Right.
customers. There's only so many people attending.
Yep.
And there's a scarcity of dollars if you're looking to earn money. So if the
Yep.
table next to you is selling prints and you have books and they're buying prints instead of books, it does feel like somebody else's victory is your loss.
Yeah.
Whether it's true or not,
Whether it's true or
it
not,
feels
yes.
that way.
Yes, because I remember at some festivals, like I would hear people say like, oh, when Raina comes to the show, she steals all my sales. And then I look at their book and their book is about like 1970s punk vinyl collecting. I'm like, I don't
Right.
think she stole any sales from you, right? Like you're not
There's
in
also-
direct competition with.
There's also very good odds that anybody showing up already has her books.
Right, right. That's true.
Like they want an autograph. Unless she's selling something else at that show, for the most part, when somebody's that huge, I mean, they might buy one because they want a signed copy. They might just bring their own copy to get signed. It's like
That's right.
That's
right.
probably a better question for her. How often is she selling a new book versus getting somebody to sign an existing copy?
Right.
Who knows?
Right.
But yeah, there's definitely that. There is the feeling of somebody else is getting something means I don't. It definitely
Right.
feels that way, and that's a crummy feeling. Especially if as you and I are often in like the kids section of an event, it especially feels that way because you really are fighting for the same audience as they come through, and you're just like, all right, if somebody gets that attention and somebody's book appeals more or whatever, if they hustle harder, whatever the case may be, it definitely feels like they won, I lost, I stink, they're good, or this is unfair, or whatever version of the story we want to play in our brains. It's
for real.
It could be a dangerous path. I know that year. The year we did TCAF, it's the one year I did it, 2016, I think it was.
I think that's right.
I remember getting. I mean, there were a lot of things to be frustrated about that particular year, in terms of our placement. At least you were in the main hall, but the kids stuff was.
I was in. Yeah.
It was rough. It was rough.
Well, and that was the funny thing is like I was looking at all you guys go like I want to be in the kids section, and then like you guys all came out of there go like oh my god, there's this bank of windows, we're all baking in there, we're all dying.
Brutal.
And I walked over there and it smelled like a locker room.
It was brutal.
Yeah.
But that was a case where like I'd self-published my book and I was ready to go, and like everybody had told me TCAF is a great show, everybody's buying books, they like to read, and then that year, and maybe it was a fluke, everybody was just buying prints. It was just prints, and it was all like Adventure Time stuff. And I was like, what is happening here? And it really felt like I missed the boat or something. So,
yeah.
And I knew my book was good, and but still, you get in your head of like, I didn't make the money back, and you have to just justify and be like, well, I'm seeing Toronto, I've never been, I'm gonna go eat poutine, I'm gonna hang out with Jersey, I'm gonna meet new people. And I did, and that was good.
Was that the year that you were staying in that weird blue hotel?
No, that was Chicago, was the Blue Hotel.
That was Chicago. Okay.
TCAF was, I was walking down the street, the boulevard, whatever, and you were hanging out with Brandon Dayton and his wife, and then Tracy and I joined you. and we just hung
Oh,
out
that's
outside
right.
for a bit. Yeah.
Oh, I remember. And we took Anne's car. That's right. We went for a ride in
Yes.
Anne's car in that heat. Anne has a little tiny car, little tiny clown car. It was you and me and Anne and Tracy Todd. Oh, that was fun.
But then we also did a drive. It was just you and me. It's just you and me that went for donuts, or was it all four of us? You took
I
me
think
on
it
a
was just.
ride and we stopped at a donut shop
That's right.
because,
Yeah, I
of
remember that.
course, we did.
Of course we did. Got to
Yeah.
get the deadline donuts. Um, okay, so Matt asked a question in the chat that I think you're really well suited to answer this.
I'll do my best.
He says, just to jump on the networking thing, do you guys have any advice on talking with publishers or anything at shows? I never know what to do there.
Oof.
But Greg, you are like, I mean, not to set you up to fail by loading you with praise and then be like, now give a great answer. But one thing that I think that I observe about you that I really like deeply admire, like almost breathlessly admire about you, is you could strike up a conversation with so many people. And I know it's sometimes you're not met well by it. Like they're like, hey, come on, quit interrogating me. But most of the time, people feel like this guy sees me and he is really curious about me. So I'm wondering, like, what is your thought on that? Like, how do you think about going up and approaching and striking up a conversation with somebody at a show?
So I think the trick of it is the things you're observing is me having a conversation with another creative person,
Okay.
versus having a conversation with a publisher, a distributor, a person whose reaction and reception, um, it's all about stakes for me, at least. So the stakes of having a conversation with, I don't know, creative person number 5, to avoid naming any names. There's no stakes there. It's like, okay, this is a person I'm going to make conversation because that's what we're doing, right? Like, I have no
Yeah.
expectation of this person. I don't want anything from them. I can't give anything to them except a conversation. Oh, here's the person I'm sitting next to at a convention for the next 3 days. Let's you know, chat. As opposed to, I have a book I'm trying to sell and I want to talk to this editor at this publishing house, and the value of this interaction is raised. That's harder to do because you get in, again, it's you get in your head, you give it more weight, and you therefore overthink it. At least I do. I shouldn't say you. I might overthink it, and I don't approach it in the same way that I would, just a general conversation. So I know when I self-published my Pix graphic novel, I was at an ALA show, and I would just walk up to booths where they had, a distributor or whatever, and I would walk up, and I was much more sort of trepidatious, like, excuse me, who do I talk to about distribution? And then, oh, this is the person. Then I'd ask like 4 questions and very quickly be defeated because out of the gate they say, oh, we don't distribute independent self-published work, and then you kind of have to find your footing and go, well, what about, and hopefully you have questions or you can follow up. But I don't know, it's hard to do. It's hard to do when you get this sense in your head that the person you're interacting with could affect your fate, your career. I don't know. It's harder to do. I don't have a definitive answer to how to make it easier, except I actually told my niece this yesterday because she said, any advice, because she's starting high school next year. And my advice for her was, nothing is as important as you think it is in high school. So
Yeah.
like, just like do things. Like it'll be fine. Like the stakes are not that high. But
Yeah.
it always feels like they are because we're trying to make something. We're trying to do something. And you get that
Well,
feeling of, if I don't get it, somebody else. It is that, like, yeah.
Well,
Go ahead.
the other thing that I find is that, like, I don't know, and do feel like more than free to like totally shut me down on this, Greg. But I feel like most of these kind of connections, like you've either won or lost in the first 3 seconds, right? Like I don't think
Sure.
there's any kind of, I've never had a conversation with anybody who I've made like a really good connection with where like I turned it around with some kind of like clever charm or great observation like 5 seconds in, right? Usually it's like I knew I got along with Tracy Todd like 5 seconds in, right?
Sure. I mean, some of that
So,
is also like, who are you dealing with? There are people that you approach and they have you're good until you prove otherwise. And then there are people that you approach and they say, prove that you're worth talking to.
oh, that's a good point. That's a very good point.
So if you're talking to somebody who is prove that you're worth talking to, that's an uphill battle that is, I, I, I bristle at those.
Yeah,
And then there's the, oh, hey, what's up? Innocent till, prove that you're guilty right now, because right now I'm taking you at value, that like you're a legit person who, your intentions are good, or you have merit just by the fact that you're here, kind of a thing.
great
And
point.
that can be tough too, because I mean, I go both ways, and I can be pretty judgmental if I see somebody's work and I don't think it's great. Then I'm all suddenly like, oh, who's this person? And I'll admit it, I do that.
You're,
I'm not so proud that I don't admit that I can be that person. Um, and then you kind of have to be a little more open minded and be like, well, what I just said about Wimpy Kid or XKCD, it doesn't matter what it looks like. Like everybody can have some value, even if
yeah.
it's just they're funny. But again, to in terms of approaching a publisher or something like that's hard. That's hard. I think it's even hard when you're hugely successful, because it's purse strings, it's career stuff. It's not the same kind of an interaction. And I wish I had better advice, but
That's not
I
bad.
don't. I've had enough interactions with publishers and editors and stuff that you think go great, and then you never hear from them again.
Right.
Uh, and it is endlessly frustrating.
Well, that's the other thing is like they're just human beings too, and they're all characters, and they're some of them are like really like for you might be super hard to read, and other people are like, what don't you get about that person?
Yeah, yeah. I look, there are plenty of people that are beloved in the comic book business that I don't particularly like, and then vice versa. So
Yeah, and there's people that we both know that where I'm like I feel really intimidated by that person, and you went what?
yeah, that also happens.
I don't know what to make of that guy. He's just like I can't pin him down. You're like no, it's not that complicated.
But what's always very satisfying is when two people fully go, "Oh yeah, that person XYZ," and everybody's like, "Yep."
Yeah, well, going back to TCAP, we had a conversation where you said, "Hey, tell me about this guy," and I went, "Oh," and you were so gleeful, you were so happy.
Well, that was a combination of things, but it's always. I mean, you are such a positive force that
Yeah.
that having you have a negative reaction to a person was like it was like a new discovery. Like I'd seen a new angle on Jersey Droz, and I was like, "Ooh, I've discovered something new."
But it
Yeah.
also confirmed some priors for you.
Yes. It confirmed my own assessment of a situation where I was like, "Okay, I'm not wrong. I'm not being such a judgmental jerk." Because again, a lot of times I think I am. So it's nice
Because
to know I'm not always.
If even Ned Flanders says, "Oh, that guy's not great,"
Yeah, exactly.
um,
Exactly.
okay, but do you ever? I mean, in any of these shows you've gone to, did you like when you were like shopping picks around? Did you bring copies of picks to show people?
So early on, I had mini comics, and I would bring the mini comics around, and I can remember two specific interactions. So one was I'd gone to, I think it was BookCon in New York in 2009. I think it was. This is a long time ago, and I was taking these mini comics around, and I had two interactions, and one of them was with a guy who saw it, liked it, but he's like, "We don't publish this kind of stuff, but you'll want to talk to this person." And I wrote that name down, and I could never get in touch with that person. And then the other interaction was with somebody at a publisher, and I wanted to hand them the mini comics, and they said, we don't take anything at shows. Like, don't hand us anything."
Mm.
Uh, and that was pretty frustrating, because I was just like, then what do we like? What? Um, and and I know now, like, they probably wanted an agent to represent it, and I've been at shows where people want to hand you stuff, but I was never a publisher. Like, as a publisher, I guess, I don't know, part of me is like, you almost have to, why not take it? What if it is that thing? What if it is that
Right.
like diamond in the rough, and you could just like be on the subway looking at it and go, hey, it's pretty good, or you could just ignore it. But
Yeah, that's right.
the flat out like, yeah, we don't accept anything at a convention just felt, I don't know, discourteous.
What are you doing here then? And like, surely you expect that people want to show you stuff because you're a publisher. So
Presumably, but didn't happen. I've since had interactions with that person, and they're very nice. But in that instance, I was very frustrated by
sure,
that
yeah,
interaction.
understandably.
Because it's one of those things where like, well, this could have been like, you don't even know what it is. Why don't you look? And again, that's a very common. I guess it's a very common feeling of like, no, just look, just give me this one, just give me a shot, just give me a shot.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's why the stakes feel so high, and that's why every interaction feels like, yeah, feels like a big deal, unless you don't
And
let it be a big deal.
right. And that's why I'm not feeling sad about not being at TCAF.
There you go. Would you feel sad about not being at TCAF if Dr. Bear was in print?
I mean, okay, so I mean, don't use this against me, but
I won't.
The thing that I'm thinking right now is like, I am like, unless somebody's paying for my travel
Yeah.
and setting up a bookseller for me. I mean, and I'm not saying that as somebody who's like, I deserve it and I'm like a big deal and people don't realize what a big deal I am. I'm saying like, if that was taken care of, we've both been to festivals where that was taken care of for us at least once, right?
Yeah.
And it is a pretty big game changer. It changes like how you feel about the whole thing. And if without that, I'm just not that excited about going to comic festivals to hawk my book. Now, I'll tell you what I am excited about doing is I'm going to put up a page on the Dr. Bear, sort of landing page that says like, hey, are you a school or a library? If you're within this many miles of Columbus, Ohio, I'll come out and I'll do a free workshop at your school. And here's video of me doing it. I'm good. Your kids are going to love it. Get me in your school. I'll sign books for you there and I'll do it for nothing. And then if you're outside of this radius, I'll show up and do it virtually. Do it virtual. And I'm good at virtual presentations too. So I'll have evidence of that. Right. And I'll have testimonials and things. That I don't mind losing money and losing time on doing that. But again, it goes back to the thing you were talking about where it's like, well, this is explicitly about my book. Whereas if I go to TCAF, I'm one of 10,000 people there with a book.
Right.
So
I do.
So yeah,
I do.
I've talked with people, like different friends who are like, oh, you got to go to SPX, you got to go to this one, you got to go to that. And when they say it, I just feel myself getting more and more tired.
Sure.
Like I love SPX, I love TCAF, I love ZXC, I love A2CAF. All these festivals are great, but it's just like the idea of schlepping all my stuff back and forth and setting up and standing there and looking at people walk by. Oh, not so fun.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think the only show I have as a possibility this year is if I'm able to somehow, by some stroke of magic, convince enough people to nominate Superhero Universe for a Ringo Award. I'll go to Baltimore.
Yeah, you gotta go.
Even though I can't imagine it would actually win, but I would go just to represent. But even there, that might be a case of I'd go and I wouldn't necessarily be set up because they set all that stuff up way before these nominations happen.
Yep.
So it might just be going to Baltimore, which would definitely not be a thing where I'd make any money because I might not even be tabling.
Right.
But I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. We ain't there yet.
But yeah, all that I said, I just want to make clear that that's subject to change. It's just that right now that's what I'm feeling. And yeah, I mean, of course it changes if you get like an actual a nomination for an award, and people should. Anybody who's watching, if you haven't gone to the ringoawards.net, I think. Let me double check that real quick.
I think it's just .com. But if you go to my social media, I've got the last posts are all about that, so you could just follow those instructions.
Yeah, so it's what is it? Gregg Schigiel on social things. There you go.
Yep, Twitter, Instagram. That's it. You find me there, you'll see all that stuff.
All the silliness.
If it happens, it happens. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Well,
It would be
I
nice.
think you're.
I mean, on some level, it'd be nice to be on a list where people go, because this is what would happen if I get a nomination. What happens is people go, "What is that? How did this
Yep.
get nominated?"
Yep.
And that's fine. I'll take it.
Take it.
I'll take it.
I'm almost done flattened. I know this isn't the most glamorous thing for people to watch. I'll allow that. One of these days,
I'm
I'm gonna get my
drawing.
button key.
I'm drawing. I'm
Oh
drawing
no,
Lion of Fire.
I know. Well, yes, you're the one worth watching today. I'm just flatting. Matt says
I'm
one of these
happy
days
to.
I'm going to get my button gear and really try to get people to nominate something I did for a Ringo. Yeah,
I mean,
I don't.
so
Yeah,
so
go
to
ahead.
the end of to the conversation we're just having about, like, you love SPX, you love these things, but it's just not. I have said out loud, like, awards don't mean anything. They don't. But if I'm nominated for one, I'm gonna talk about it. I'm gonna care. They
Yeah,
don't mean anything. They don't, in my experience at least. They don't really move the needle. I know people have been nominated for Eisner Awards, and they don't demand a higher pay rate, or they don't get a book deal out of it. They're just nominated for an Eisner Award.
yeah.
I very proudly won Kids Comics Awards, and I sent those to the publisher and said, "Look, this happened," and they seemed to go, "Cool," and that was
Right.
it. So it's all it's in the end we have to. Here's some psychology 101 stuff. In the
All
end, we
right.
all have to, like, find our own validation in ourselves, right?
Yes, that's what it
Like
really
that's
shakes out to.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's and that's actually it makes part of it all a lot trickier, because yeah, validate yourself, and you see it online all the time. How do I make comics? Like, just make comics, and that's true, but it doesn't answer the question, how do I make comics professionally and continue to make comics professionally? Because just making comics isn't enough. Like, there's more
Yeah.
to it. And I don't know the answers, and I kind of make them professionally. I mean, I earn my living doing things that aren't making comics in the grand scheme.
Same. Same.
Yeah. So,
Oh, hey. Well, I am done with my work. I could work on something else, but I also don't want to hold you too long. Because I know you actually like recombobulated your day for me, and I am so grateful, Greg.
well, I'm always happy to recombobulate my day for you. Um,
Uh,
I actually went to the gym already. I got it out of the way. You inspired me to
oh,
to get my button gear. Yeah.
oh, that's great. Um, yeah, I'll say this, and it'll seem possibly performative, but I also like to say it publicly just because I like to watch my friends get a pat on the back in front of other people. But like Greg, you're like one of those guys where I know I can show up and I can say whatever's in my heart, and even if it doesn't come out right and it sounds like it might be something else, I know you're instead of being like, "Whoa," you're gonna say, "Wait a minute, tell me more about that." Right? I could just be an unfiltered version of myself around you, and that's a rare thing. Um,
Well, I appreciate that. I can tell you that is something I've learned more and more how to do with each year of my life. So I appreciate it, and I know you are the same. You are an open soul, and again, it's a rare you and Anne, good people. I like you people.
mm, uh,
Did you know? Speaking of nothing to do with any of that, did you know that
mm,
today? So next week is Free Comic Book Day.
that's right.
Um, but this weekend, today is Independent Bookstore Day.
I did not know that.
Yeah, today's
I
Independent
should know
Bookstore
that.
Day. Well, now you
Huh.
do. And it's not quite like Free Comic Book Day, but it's more like Record Store Day, where independent bookstores they're supposed to have, like, incentive objects,
Mm,
like tote bags and things. But if you were thinking of buying a book, consider going to your local independent bookseller.
will do. Hear that, everybody?
Yeah.
Everybody watching? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people in the chat, presumably.
There you go.
So,
Uh, all right, Jersey. Here's a quick question before we
okay.
log off. So here's
Yeah.
this page, right?
Hmm.
and it's our introduction to this team in the future. So we're seeing everybody kind of using their powers, right? We've got Ostretch up front stretching, and then this is Lion of Fire. I love that name. So Lion of Fire is working on the time machine. Ostretch is handing him something. What is he handing him? I have no idea.
Oh yeah. Well, it's got to be something that looks vaguely like a wrench, right? It always has.
I mean, it's very small, so it doesn't entirely matter what it is. It's in the future, so I can make anything up. But you're saying wrench? Wrench is your go-to?
Wrench, or what was that thing that Bob Vila was hawking years ago, where it was basically like a strap on a piece of plastic that you could put around any lid and open it? Matt Nelson would say it's a beer.
I mean, is it like a ratchet of some kind?
Yeah, like okay, a socket wrench. There you go.
Yeah, I guess it could be. I mean, it could also just be like something that just looks like a strange futuristic dongle.
It could be.
Yeah. In fact, it's gonna be something that looks like this.
The ultimate nullifier.
Yeah, whatever this is that I just drew, that's what he's handing him. That piece is very important to the time machine working.
And that, my friends, is why they're called a make-em-up.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That is a full make-em-up. Yeah, well, I feel accomplished. I feel like I got that one panel done. I've drawn 3 of the figures on this page. So,
yeah,
cranking along.
I'm grateful for you for helping me test out the multi, cartoonist setup for the live streams. So I'll edit out that I'll edit out that clumsy stuff at the top, and then I will send this to you in case you want to put it in your newsletter, which people could sign up for at greggschigiel.com. You won't regret it. It's a really good monthly newsletter.
I got to write one tomorrow for Monday. Oh boy. What am I going to talk? I'll probably show some of these layouts in the newsletter. Hey, look, everybody, I'm working on it. These aren't even layouts. These are pencils, so I could show actual pencil drawings. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
thanks everybody
Matt,
for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks everybody for watching, and I'll see you next week.